Clay Hartman stood among the clapping crowd at Roy's grand opening, holding a pie and a dream, neither of which anyone had asked for. The Saturday air in Maple Glen carried a crispness that made the hay bales smell sweeter, the pumpkin spice float through the crowd like incense. The town square had been transformed into a canvas of fall pride, orange streamers, corn stalks, and booths offering hot cider in styrofoam cups. A local country band played near the gazebo, their banjo twang blending into the laughter of families and the occasional bark of a golden retriever in a baby costume. This was Maple Glen's Fall Harvest Festival at its finest. Clay shifted his weight near Roy's new food truck, Roy's Rolling Grill, wrapped in polished chrome with the business name burned into cedar slats. A steady line of townsfolk waited, chatting about Roy's natural business sense and how he's just like George, always knew how to work with his hands. That last one stung. Clay, holding a pear and ginger pie in both hands, smiled at no one in particular. His father once said, "Some kids build things, some kids build castles in the clouds." Clay never forgot which one he was. He watched Roy, beaming in a black apron embroidered in gold thread, hand off samples of brisket sliders to old classmates and longtime neighbors. The tip jar, shaped like a pig wearing sunglasses, jingled with every exchange. Marlene stood nearby with two relatives from out of town, already bragging about Roy's projected catering gigs. "Clay." Roy spotted him. "You made it, man." Clay raised the pie slightly. "Brought this. Pear and ginger." Roy took it, hesitant. "You baked." "Thought it might go nice with the cider crowd." "I also," he reached into his satchel, pulling out a trifold pamphlet. "Updated version of my project. Just thought, maybe someone here might want to know about it." Roy glanced at it, then nodded without opening it. "Sure, I'll check it out." A new customer waved. "Be right with you." Marlene approached, eyes on the pie. "Oh, honey, that's sweet. But we're not doing dessert today. Branding, you know? Brisket first impression." Clay's smile tightened. "Sure." As he moved back into the crowd, he heard the unmistakable baritone of George, glass of sweet tea in hand, giving a toast to the gathering near the tent. "Roy here," he began, "built this truck with vision, sweat, and grit. He's a builder. Always has been. Got that from our side of the family." Laughter and claps followed. Then a man asked, "And your other boy? What's he up to these days?" Clay slowed his step. George replied, "Clay's more of a dreamer. Into apps, or online something. You know how kids are. Hobby stuff." The words hung like fog in Clay's chest. He kept walking, slipping the pamphlet back into his bag, but it felt heavier now. Across the square, the red brick diner, Nellie's, reflected sunlight in warm patches. Roy had parked his truck in front of it, just as their dad had once done with his old work van during the 4th of July cookouts. History, Clay supposed, did like to rhyme. He found the trash can next to the lamppost by the community bulletin board. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he dropped the pamphlet inside, neatly folded. The pie followed, its gingham cloth catching on the rim for a second before it tumbled out of sight. "Hold up, was that a pear and ginger?" Clay turned. A woman with a wool beret and thick cane was stepping cautiously off the curb. Her foot slipped on a leaf and she wobbled. He moved instinctively, steadying her arm before she could fall. "You all right, ma'am?" She clutched his elbow, catching her breath. "I'm old, not fragile," she muttered, then looked up. "You've got good hands. And something in your bag worth saving, maybe?" Eleanor sipped her black tea, studying Clay like he was a line from a book she used to love but forgot how it ended. She sat back in a creaking wicker chair, the twilight folding itself gently around the porch. The teacup, rimmed with faded violets, rested on a delicate saucer beside a lace doily. On top of the doily sat a pamphlet, slightly wrinkled, corners bent, the same one Clay had thrown away 3 days earlier. Now, here it was again, held with care. Not by his parents, but by someone who had bothered to read it. The porch smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Clay sat across from her, mug in hand, steam rising in slow curls. The leaves of the maple tree in her yard rustled in the distance, accompanied by the soft chime of hanging metal tubes that danced when the wind wandered by. "I didn't know what kind of tea you liked," Eleanor said. "So I made you what I make myself. Strong and unsweetened. It doesn't lie to you." Clay smiled faintly. "It's good. Reminds me of my grandfather's." Eleanor's eyebrow lifted. He liked black tea. He liked things that weren't in fashion anymore. Vinyl records. Wood glue. Words like courting. Clay glanced out toward the garden. "He's part of why I started Silver Circle." "Oh." He couldn't remember his pills. Kept missing appointments. He didn't want to be a burden, so he stopped asking for help. Started forgetting on purpose. Clay's voice was steady, but it trailed at the edges. "I thought, maybe there's a better way." Eleanor sipped again, her gaze unmoving. "And what way is that, Mr. Hartman?" "Silver Circle. It's an app, but more than that. Seniors can log reminders for medicine, groceries, light errands. It syncs with nearby volunteers who've signed up to help." He leaned forward. "People like my grandfather don't want sympathy. They want dignity and options. My app gives them both." She tapped the pamphlet gently. "This says version 3.1. Means you've tried before. Twice. And pitched it 4 times. No traction. Too quiet of a voice, maybe. Or too many loud ones around you." Eleanor set the tea aside and stood slowly. Clay moved to help, but she waved him off. "Let me show you something." She led him through the screen door into her house, walls lined with framed prints of fountain pens and pressed flowers. The hallway narrowed into a cozy study filled with sunlight-bleached shelves, a large oak desk, and dozens of handwritten recipe cards pinned like memories across a corkboard. "I used to run a stationery co-op," she said, opening a drawer with a soft clack. "Back when people still wrote letters and knew their mailman's birthday. Ran it for 22 years before the internet said hello." She pulled out an envelope and pressed it into Clay's hand. "Inside is $500. From my Mad Money drawer. I usually spend it on yarn or good peaches. But this feels better." Clay froze. "I can't take that." "You're not taking it. I'm investing it. There's a difference. And before you get that noble look I know you're brewing, just know this, old people aren't done yet. We don't need to move fast to make a difference." A soft rustle interrupted them. From the hallway, a chunky gray tabby ambled in and leapt onto Clay's lap with surprising confidence. "That's Moose. He doesn't sit on just anyone." Clay chuckled as the cat began kneading his thigh. "Must be the tea." Eleanor watched the two of them for a moment, then picked up a silver frame from the mantel. Inside was a photo, a younger Eleanor, her husband, tall, smiling, wearing a paper crown, and a holiday table covered in too many casseroles. "He passed 12 years ago," she said quietly. "But he'd have liked you. Thoughtful. A little stubborn. Willing to try." Clay studied the photo, then looked back at her. "Thank you. For this. For everything." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she returned to the porch, motioning for him to follow. The sun was almost gone now, leaving behind gold and violet streaks in the sky. "Don't tell your parents yet," she said as they sat back down. "Let them see you bloom before they take credit for watering." The wind shifted slightly. Eleanor reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small notepad. She tore off a sheet and handed it to Clay. "Name's Frank Beringer. City Planning Department. He owes me a favor." She gave him a knowing wink. Might as well start planting seeds in the right soil. The Silver Circle prototype was glitchy, the font too small, but Mr. Doyle remembered his 2 p.m. meds for the first time all week. Clay stared at the interface glowing dimly on his borrowed library laptop. The calendar sync was off by 2 hours, and every time he tapped the reminder feature, it blinked twice before crashing. But Mr. Doyle, stubborn as ever, had used it anyway and called this morning to say, with a kind of gruff triumph, "Your gizmo actually told me what to do. First time I didn't have to guess." The words still rang in Clay's head as he sat cross-legged on the basement carpet of the Maple Glen Public Library. The overhead lights flickered faintly, and a vintage poster for Mouse Hunt, 1997, curled in one corner above a faded reading nook. He had carved out a quiet corner for himself between the coat rack and the heater vent, a makeshift headquarters with extension cords and cold coffee. Beside him, Eleanor's check was taped to his notebook. On the back, her note in looping cursive, "Start small. But start." Clay tapped the keys again, sighing as a pixelated progress wheel spun endlessly. "Come on. You're trying too hard," said a voice behind him. He looked up. A woman around his age leaned against the doorframe, chewing on the end of a granola bar. Faded hoodie, green glasses, chipped nail polish. "I can hear your frustration clicking from 3 shelves over," she added. "Sorry," Clay muttered. "You building a banking app or something? Community support platform for seniors?" He gestured to the screen. "Silver Circle. Connects older adults with nearby volunteers for errands, medication reminders, stuff like that." Her eyebrows lifted. "You made that?" "Trying to. I'm more idea than execution right now." She stepped closer. "I'm Marcy. I used to design mobile interfaces before I took a break. Mind if I look?" "Please." She sat, brushing a dust bunny off her jeans, and took the laptop. "The font's a war crime. Buttons are too close. But the idea's solid. I don't have much funding." "I don't need funding," she replied. "But I do like apple fritters. From Nellie's. Warm." Clay blinked. "That's an affordable contract." She grinned. "Deal." By Saturday morning, they had something usable, bare bones, but functional. Marcy had mocked up a clean dashboard, Mr. Doyle helped test the notification feature, and 2 other seniors agreed to run daily check-ins for a trial. Clay printed out flyers on the library copier, taped them to the bulletin board near the pharmacist's counter and the diner's restroom door. The Maple Glen Farmers Market was brisk that weekend. Bales of hay framed the booths, children clutched candy apples, and the aroma of cider donuts hung in the air. Clay stood behind a small folding table with a Silver Circle banner hand-drawn by Marcy in blue Sharpie. He wore his best flannel shirt and smiled more than he usually did. Mr. Doyle shuffled by mid-morning, a paper bag under one arm. "Told the pastor this thing reminded me about my blood pressure pills," he said, patting the old phone in his pocket. He nearly dropped his cinnamon roll. "Any issues?" "Only that I didn't have this when my wife was alive." She'd have nagged less. Behind them, a vendor selling local honey overheard and raised her phone. "Mind if I record this?" she asked. Mr. Doyle straightened up. "Just don't use a filter. My wrinkles earned their keep." He looked directly into the lens. Finally, someone in tech who still knows how to shake hands. Clay chuckled, grateful and surprised. Marcy nudged him with a fresh fritter. "You're trending with folks who still read newspapers," she joked. Later that afternoon, they sat at Nellie's diner, Clay scribbling notes in a yellow pad while Marcy adjusted settings on her tablet. The waitress topped off their coffee without asking, and a couple from the Rotary Club stopped by to ask about signing up. Marcy glanced at her phone. "By the way, that video? Just crossed 3,200 shares." She leaned back, smirking. "You might want to get ready. The circle's about to get a whole lot bigger." Clay's face wasn't in the viral video, but people started calling Nellie's asking when the young man with the app would be back. The diner's usual flow had shifted. Where there were once 3 old-timers arguing about baseball schedules and weather predictions, now came clusters of folks in windbreakers and wool scarves, holding their phones with curiosity. They sipped their coffee slower, eyes scanning the room for someone they hadn't met but felt they already knew. "Is this where the Silver Circle guy eats?" someone asked the waitress, who simply pointed toward Clay's regular booth, even though he wasn't in today. "Tell him I've got a cousin in Asheville who could use this thing," said another. Hard of hearing, but he checks his phone more than his stove. Behind the counter, Nellie herself, apron flour dusted, hair pinned into a sensible twist, laughed and shook her head. Didn't think I'd be hosting startup talk next to my hash browns. The video had made its way to a local station, Maple Glen's Channel 9, where it aired in a segment called New Traditions in Old Towns. They showed a clip of Mr. Doyle leaning on his cane, gesturing to Clay's app like it was the second coming of sliced bread. There was something about the way he spoke, plain, no polish, that made the message land. He made a thing that helps without making you feel dumb, Doyle had said. Feels like respect in your pocket. By Wednesday, the diner had unofficially become a satellite office. Flyers stacked by the napkin dispensers, an older couple whispering to each other about whether the app could be used to remind their grandson to check on them. Meanwhile, Clay stood in Marcy's kitchen, flipping through a folder of printouts. 16 new users, he said. 10 from town. 6 from surrounding areas. Feedback's mostly positive, except Mrs. Gale thinks the calendar icon looks too much like a waffle. Marcy smirked, dunking a bag of tea into her chipped mug. You're the only startup founder I've ever met who tips in pie and takes interface notes from a woman who still owns a flip phone. Clay grinned, though his shoulders stayed tight. I've got a community panel next week. Mayor wants to highlight local innovation. She raised her eyebrows. That sounds dangerously close to being noticed. He said, quieter than before. That Friday, the Hartmans hosted a backyard barbecue. It was Roy's idea, celebrate brisket season and his growing list of food truck bookings. The yard smelled like mesquite smoke and brown sugar glaze, folding into the scent of turning leaves and charcoal. People mingled with plastic cups, chatting near lawn chairs and under string lights George had fished out of the garage. Clay arrived late, carrying a small bowl of roasted sweet potatoes, unsure if it was meant to count as a side or an apology. Marlene greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and a sideways glance. Roy's over there near the grill. He's been doing interviews this week too, you know. Carolina Eats posted him yesterday. I saw, Clay said. Introductions came fast and loose. Someone gestured toward Clay and said, "This is Roy's brother, the one with the tech thing." Roy overheard. He laughed, politely, but something in his posture stiffened. Throughout the evening, more guests asked about Silver Circle. Could it track blood pressure meds? Could it pair with voice assistants? Could their daughter sign them up remotely? Roy poured drinks, nodded absently, but said little. As twilight fell, Clay found him by the smoker, alone. Been meaning to ask, Clay started. We're starting a nutrition component. Grocery support, meal delivery, basic prep for seniors. Thought maybe you'd want in. You're good with menus. Logistics. You've built a name. Roy didn't look up. You want me to be the side gig to your main course? Clay blinked. No. I want to work with you. Roy turned. I don't need your pity gig, Clay. He set down his tongs and walked away. Back inside, George leaned against the kitchen counter, folding a napkin slowly in half. He cleared his throat. Does that app of yours, he said without looking up, help with little things, like tracking my morning pills? Eleanor watched from the front row in a crimson shawl, whispering, now, don't mumble. The future's listening. The Maple Glen Town Hall, dressed in amber garlands and flickering votive candles, hummed with polite chatter and the warm scent of cinnamon and nutmeg. Jazz notes drifted from the corner stage, where a trio in suspenders and bow ties played soft, swaying melodies. The annual Harvest Gala and Honors Night had never looked so polished. Pie slices rested on linen-covered tables like little trophies. A banner stretched across the stage backdrop, Silver Circle, powered by community. Clay stood near the edge of the room, straightening the cuffs of his only sport coat. He caught a glimpse of himself in the reflection of a glass pie case. Not nervous, exactly. Just exposed. From the side aisle, he saw Eleanor seated, posture firm and head slightly tilted as if listening for meaning beneath every note of the jazz. He remembered what Marlene had said before he left home, don't make this night about you. Roy's still your brother. And what Eleanor had countered, maybe it's finally your turn. Lights dimmed. The mayor stepped up to the podium in his signature plaid blazer and gave a few words about harvest, heritage, and the importance of remembering who we are when the leaves fall. Then, with a flourish, he introduced Eleanor Briggs. She took the microphone like someone who'd held truth longer than most folks had held smartphones. When I was young, she began, our town honored farmers and quilt makers and war veterans. We still should. But tonight, I want to talk about quiet kindness. About the kind of person who sees needs others don't. And who doesn't wait for applause before doing the work. She paused, scanning the crowd. Clayton Hartman, please join me. Clay moved to the stage slowly, passing rows of neighbors, some of whom he'd helped without ever learning their names. He took the mic, breath steady. He began with the basics, Silver Circle's features, how it helped coordinate volunteers, set reminders, and bridge small gaps that often led to big loneliness. Then he read aloud a testimonial from Mrs. Canfield, a widow who used the app to request weekly walks with her niece. Another from Mr. Doyle, who now remembered his meds, because something finally remembered him. The mayor returned to the podium. It's with great pride, he said, that we announce Maple Glen's official pilot partnership with Silver Circle. With grant funding and service integration starting this December, this program will touch every household that wants it. Applause broke out, enthusiastic, genuine. Clay nodded and smiled, then added his own words. None of this happens without community, he said. Without people like Eleanor Briggs, who see things others miss. Without folks like Marcy LaSalle, who gave time she didn't owe. And without the seniors of Maple Glen, who trusted a stranger with their routines. He didn't mention Marlene. Or George. Or Roy. From his place near the pie table, Roy folded his arms. His jaw didn't clench, but it didn't relax either. Guests began to approach Clay one by one, some to shake his hand, some to ask questions, and some just to say thank you. The town councilwoman gave him a business card. The pharmacist offered to include Silver Circle flyers with every refill. Marcy found him near the water cooler and held up her phone. Scholarship reinstated, she said, eyes gleaming. Guess who wrote me a letter the size of a novella? Clay smiled. Let me guess. Signed it, Crimson Shawl Authority. More like, citizen of long memory, but. Across the room, George stood by the double doors. He gestured with a subtle wave, and Clay excused himself. They walked a few steps into a quiet alcove near the cloakroom. George cleared his throat. Your mother's crying, he said. She thinks she missed something big. Clay didn't flinch. You didn't miss it. You just weren't looking. There was no anger in his tone. Just a quiet truth between men who hadn't always known how to speak to each other. Later, as the crowd began to thin and chairs were folded into stacks, Eleanor reappeared beside Clay, her shawl now pinned with a small antique brooch. She reached into her purse and slipped him a small envelope. This belongs to someone who builds things quietly. Thanksgiving morning smelled like cinnamon, roasted yams, and healing. Sunlight slanted across the lace-trimmed tablecloth in the Hartman dining room, catching the silver trim of the serving platters and warming the wooden floorboards that had been waxed for the occasion. The smell of sage stuffing drifted from the kitchen, mingling with baked apples and the subtle salt of roasted turkey. It was a holiday spread George would have called just enough food to embarrass the stove, and Marlene had outdone herself. There was one chair at the head of the table set apart, empty but not forgotten. On its seat lay a folded crimson shawl and a handwritten note in careful, looping script, gone traveling. Still watching. Clay stood by the window, coffee cup in hand, his reflection blending into the porch scene outside. The quiet hadn't felt awkward this year. Just full. The door creaked open. Roy stepped in holding a ceramic dish with mismatched oven mitts. Sweet potato casserole, he said. No marshmallows. Like you like it. Clay raised an eyebrow. From scratch. Roy shrugged. Mostly. Got Marcy to taste test it. Behind him, Marcy appeared with a tote bag full of cider bottles and a crooked smile. He used nutmeg like it owed him money. Smelled good in the car, Roy added, setting the dish on the warmer tray. Marlene emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an embroidered towel. She paused when she saw the casserole, then glanced toward Clay and nodded. Quiet approval, folded into the moment like a seasoned spice. As they took their seats, Marlene placed Eleanor's shawl on the chair and smoothed it with both palms. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Clay stood, glass in hand. "I've been thinking about this year," he began, voice steady but soft, "and all the things we don't always say. So, here's to the people who believed, even when it was just one person." A pause. Then quiet clinks of glass. No cheers. Just acknowledgement. Dinner was warm, unhurried. George recounted a story about his own father overcooking cornbread in '82. Marcy explained what user onboarding meant to a very confused Roy. There was laughter, too. The kind that didn't try to fix anything, just made room. Later, as plates were cleared and leftovers packed into mismatched containers, George pulled Clay aside near the hallway. "I was scared," he said. "Scared that if I believed in you and you fell, it'd be my fault for letting you dream that big." Clay didn't answer at first. Then he nodded. "You believing wouldn't have made me fall. But it might have made me stand up faster." After the kitchen quieted, Clay went to his old bedroom, now mostly storage, and opened the envelope Eleanor had given him. Inside was a deed. Her old stationery shop, still listed under her name, signed over in ink that looked as steady as ever. Folded around it was a note, "Your circle's bigger now. Time for a door that stays open." By mid-afternoon, they gathered downtown on the same sidewalk where Roy's food truck had first opened. The chill had returned to Maple Glen, but the street held the warm memory of harvest banners and laughter. Clay knelt, aligning the edges of a hand-painted sign above the newly cleaned window of Eleanor's former shop. It read, "Silver Circle HQ, bold. Blue. Hopeful." Behind him, Roy held the drill. "Ready?" "Only if you bring your brisket," Clay said, without turning. "The real stuff." Roy grinned. "You're finally learning to ask nicely." Marcy stood on tiptoe to steady the edge, while Mr. Doyle leaned against a ladder, muttering about proper angle and torque like it was national security. And for the first time, Clay stood at the center of the street, and belonged there. Thanksgiving came and went, but the warmth it left lingered far longer than the scent of cinnamon and roasted yams. In a town that once saw Clay as a shadow behind his brother's spotlight, quiet acts of kindness had slowly redrawn the light. Sometimes, the people we underestimate, because of their silence, their simplicity, or their softness, carry the very tools to build something lasting. Kindness, when given freely and without expectation, has a way of returning to us, expanded, echoed, and deeply remembered. So if this story stirred something in you, let it settle gently, and perhaps pass it on, not with fanfare, but with quiet intention. Like a porch light left on for someone still finding their way home.